Hi, and welcome back to Tony's Cool Tools. If you're new, thanks for stopping by. Two quick announcements. First, the Great Lakes Logging and Heavy Equipment Show are this weekend, September 8th through the 10th. Both Chris from In the Woodyard and I will be attending, and if we're walking around and you see us, stop by and introduce yourself. We'd love to meet our viewers. Second, don't know what's going on, but several viewers have contacted me that YouTube has unsubscribed them. So if you wouldn't mind, please double check that you are subscribed to my channel. I surely would appreciate it. Thanks. I have a question. It's kind of a personal one. Do you have a bladder problem? I know that might be too much to ask, but we'll be talking about IBC and not IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. We'll be talking about the IBC, intermediate bulk containers. Most people find it a problem taking care of these bladders inside, but I'll show you several ways of taking and using them in a different kind of a way. Let me show you. First, we got to take the bars off to get the tote out. Here we go. Most, but not all, use a T40 Torx bit to remove these screws. Now let's remove the bars. Sometimes these are bent and you have to play with them a little bit. Sometimes I've even had to cut these little holders here to get these bars out. But these are useful. Now we just have to remove the bladder. Next is removing these corner protectors. I'm all about reduce, reuse, and recycle. I try to utilize all of the pieces so I don't have to buy stuff, especially now since it's so doggone expensive. I'm always trying to learn how to repurpose the items, such as the bars, the corner protectors, and the metal. The metal, most of the time I leave on because I could write notes on it, such as the dates of the wood that I'm putting out in the field. But I'd appreciate what you use these for. Let me know in the comments, please. Okay, what is a breathable IBC tote? Let me show you. And you're asking, why do I need breathable IBC bladders? I needed them to store my cookies. That sounds kind of kinky, but regardless, I do need a place to store my cookies and my limb wood that I cut to 16 inches and keep it dry. And A, I can either sell it, or B, use it in my outdoor wood boiler. Here's a smaller version of the breathable IBC bladder. Depending on how I cut the bladders, I utilize every part I can. This one I had two sections that I cut in half. I used one on a different project, but this is what you're looking at. Now the sides on this one are flimsy. It will still hold wood or cookies, but it does bow out depending on how much you put in it. So I decided to put this electrician's THH wire in here and hold the sides from bowing out too much. And then I go ahead and put a top on this and put it in the woods, and I mark it as to what date I have on it. And I've been using them for the last couple of years now. Here are a couple of ways of cutting the bladders. the first or more common way that I see is cutting them diagonally so that they fit over the IBC bladder. The other option is cutting both the top and the bottom of the bladder to make these covers, but they're primarily used for the IBC totes after filling them with wood. And either A, you can make the size smaller or longer so that you could put more wood in. As I mentioned before, this is the way I was cutting them at the beginning, just like this. But as I mentioned, the sides are flimsy. Afterwards, what I found is if I take and cut this, I had used this on the project for the axis table, but I'm going to be cutting these around here. And if you leave this round section on, it's very stiff. So you can toss stuff in and it won't disfigure the IBC bladders. This is a really good way of doing it. And you can either do it in the width like this on a pallet, or you can flip this over and do it so that you have more room on the top. But I find that's a little bit more difficult to grab the wood out of it afterwards. I like this method better. We had to switch and move to the pole barn because I'm going to be making a big mess with what I'm going to be doing now. So let me show you. I'm using my Bosch cordless jigsaw. You can use a reciprocating saw as well, or whatever you feel comfortable with. But I find this works best for me. I'm using a scroll saw blade, which doesn't really matter, but you want to use something with a TPI or tooth per inch of 6 to 20, somewhere in there, and it'll remove the material. Anything for metal cutting you probably wouldn't want to use because they're very fine teeth and it'll take you forever to cut it. I use the Bosch jigsaw bits. I already mentioned that I use this particular IBC tote for my access table, the plastic part. So I figure utilize this now for my cookie bin as well. So I've determined which way I want to cut this. I've marked it. You don't really have to mark it. You can freehand it. But it's easier for me because a lot of times I keep certain pieces and I want them at least close to being equal as I can. So let's get to cutting. The nice thing about the scroll saw blade is I can make turns and don't have to drill a pilot hole for my blade to go in. A lot of times if you don't do that, you could possibly snap the blade. Let's get to drilling now. I'm using what's referred to as a Forstner bit. That's what it looks like. It's also pictured here. So the one pictured says 3/4 of an inch. I prefer using a 1 inch if possible, but I didn't have one. So the closest one I had was this one here, which is 7/8 of an inch. The purpose for this type of a drill bit is that it cuts on its edges and it gives you a clean cut. You definitely don't need that, and there are several different ways of making holes in one of these for the IBC bladder to breathe. But this is what I find works best for me. I start at the bottom now, so I flip the container over and we'll start making some holes. I like to make the holes approximately 8 to 10 inches apart and do the whole perimeter of the IBC bladder. I timed it and it took about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. So roughly within about 13 to 15 minutes, I could have one of these done. Here's the finished product. As you can see, it's a little bit messy, leaves these little discs down there, but as you can tell, it's all perforated. This will help the cookies breathe and dry out, and a top put on this, and we can set it in the yard and let it dry out. I'm still cleaning up from the straight line winds and tornadoes that we received here, but all these totes, these IBC bladders here, are full of either cookies, or I store some of my kindling in here as well. Here is another one I took the top off of recently, but this is all ready to burn now. Very, very dry. All these here are ready to go. Here's my bladder storage area. I've got quite a few, so I can really make a lot of cookie bins out of this. But they come in handy in every aspect, especially these diagonal cut pieces. One last use of the IBC bladder material. As you can see right over here, I use the fabric material so weeds don't come and grow underneath the pallets. But what I've found, which I really like, is if I get any of the 330 gallon IBC bladders, I cut them and lay them down here, and nothing grows on underneath them as well. The other advantage is if you ever need to put an IBC tote somewhere where you don't want it to freeze to the ground, and I know that's happened to several of us, and you end up destroying your IBC tote, is to put this down first and then put your IBC tote on top, and it will not freeze to the bottom. Just food for thought. I don't discard these pieces as well. They make great material for writing signs on, such as when the firewood or the cookies were cut, so I have an idea. All I do is cut them into squares, put a date on them, and drill a hole, and then wire tie them to the IBC tote. Hopefully you found this video on breathable IBC totes interesting and informative. I think it'll work for you if you give it a try. There are so many uses for the application of the IBC material. If you do have others, please leave them in the comment. I'm always interested. Love to find other ways of utilizing these. And remember, pass it forward. Make the world a better place. And don't be a tool. Watch Tony's Cool Tools.